I was 24 when this happened, living alone in a small apartment complex on the quiet side of town. Back then, nothing in my life felt unusual. I worked a normal job, kept to myself, and came home to the same routine every evening. Most nights I'd heat up something simple for dinner, sit on the couch, and let the TV run in the background until I got tired enough to go to bed. Nothing special ever happened in that place. It was the kind of building where people nodded politely in the hallway but rarely talked, and the loudest noise you'd hear at night was someone closing their car door a little too hard in the parking lot. That evening was just like any other. I remember the weather being cool enough that I kept the windows shut, and the building felt quieter than usual. I had a few emails to finish from work, so I sat at my small dining table with my laptop, a cup of coffee, and the radio playing at a low volume. It was the kind of calm, steady night where you don't expect anything to happen. For most of the evening, nothing did. I worked, took a shower, folded some laundry, and thought about sleeping early for once. Around 10 p.m., I walked around the apartment doing the little chores I always forgot, throwing out the trash, putting dishes in the sink, checking if I had anything left for breakfast. Everything felt completely normal. I wasn't stressed. I wasn't distracted. I wasn't thinking about anything except the next workday. I remember telling myself how nice it was that the hallway was so quiet. Usually, someone would be walking around or talking on the phone near the stairwell. But that night, it felt like the whole building had gone to sleep at the same time. I sat back down at the table and opened my laptop again. When I did, I noticed my phone blinking with a notification from the small indoor camera I kept pointed at my living room window. It was cheap, nothing special, just something I bought after a few break-ins had been reported in the neighborhood. The notification said motion detected, which wasn't unusual. The camera sometimes triggered when a car's headlights hit the glass or when a branch outside moved. I almost ignored it. But then I saw something that made me pause, just a split-second freeze frame from the alert. The image was dark, grainy, and hard to see, but there was a faint outline of something near the window. It didn't look like a person. It didn't look like an animal either. It looked like a hand, just the shape of one, pressed flat against the glass. I figured it was a glitch, maybe a reflection, maybe the camera catching the edge of a shadow. I didn't think much of it at the time. I didn't even go check the window. I just cleared the notification and went back to typing. But later, when everything finally escalated, I kept thinking about that first image. That faint hand shape. That still frame I ignored. Because that was the first sign. The first moment something in my apartment wasn't right. I had been living in that apartment for almost a year. It was a small, two-story complex on the edge of a quiet Ohio town, the kind of place built in the late 90s and never updated, but still clean enough that nobody complained. My unit was on the second floor, at the far end of the hallway, next to the emergency stairwell. I liked that spot because it meant fewer people walked past my door, and I could come and go without running into too many neighbors. The building itself always felt a little hollow. The walls were thin, the carpet in the hallway had that worn-down look from years of footsteps, and the lights flickered sometimes when the weather was bad. But it was never unsafe. At least, that's what I believed back then. Most of the tenants were older or worked early morning shifts, so nights were usually quiet enough that you could hear someone opening their fridge 2 units down. The night everything happened was a Thursday. It was late fall, cold, but not yet winter, and the air outside felt heavy, like rain might come even though the sky had been clear all day. I had stayed home after work because I didn't feel like going anywhere. My job at the time was draining, not because it was difficult, but because it required constant talking. I handled customer calls for a small insurance company, and by the end of the day, I usually just wanted silence. My only plan was to eat, finish a few emails, and maybe watch something before bed. Nothing about the evening felt unusual. The building smelled faintly of the neighbors cooking. Someone upstairs was walking around, but that was normal. He worked nights sometimes and moved quietly enough that I barely noticed. I wasn't expecting visitors. I barely knew anyone in the complex. There was an older woman 2 doors down who sometimes said hello, and a young couple near the entrance who kept to themselves. Nobody else ever really lingered in the hallways or tried to make conversation. It was that kind of place, everyone in their own bubble. Inside my apartment, everything was in its usual order. The kitchen light was on. The living room lamp was dim, and the small camera I had set up faced the window at a slight angle. I kept it there because earlier that month, someone had tried breaking into cars in our parking lot. It wasn't a big incident, but it was enough for me to buy a camera just in case. I never actually expected to need it. I remember thinking how calm the night felt. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft static from the radio, the low creak of the building settling. Even the road outside seemed quieter than usual. It was one of those evenings where nothing draws your attention. No loud noises, no arguments, no slamming doors. Just quiet, steady routine. That's why the later moments stood out so much. Because nothing about that night gave me any reason to prepare for what was coming. For the first hour or so, nothing felt strange. I kept working on my laptop, answered a few emails, and tried to finish everything before I lost motivation. It was around 10:30 p.m. when I first noticed something that didn't feel right. It wasn't loud or dramatic. Just a small, faint detail that made me pause for a second. I heard a soft tap on the wall behind me. At first, I thought it was the neighbor. The guy upstairs sometimes dropped things or moved furniture late at night. It wasn't unusual, but this sound didn't come from above. It came from the wall shared with the empty unit next to mine. Nobody lived there at the time. The apartment had been vacant for weeks. I remember the landlord complaining about how long it was taking to fill it. I turned down the radio and listened. Nothing. Just silence. I shrugged it off and went back to typing. A few minutes later, I heard something else. Not a tap this time. More like a short, dragging sound, like fabric brushing against something rough. It was so faint, I wasn't even sure I heard it. I got up, walked to the shared wall, and put my hand against it. It felt cold, but that wasn't unusual either. The corner units always held the outside temperature longer. I went back to my chair. That's when my phone buzzed again, another motion alert from the camera by the window. I sighed, assuming it was headlights or a moth. I checked the thumbnail anyway. It was just black. No shape, no movement, just darkness. For a second, I wondered if the camera was malfunctioning. I cleared the alert and set the phone down. Not long after that, the apartment felt colder. Not freezing, not dramatic, just a subtle drop. Enough to make me rub my arms. I checked the thermostat, and it was still set to the same temperature. I figured maybe the draft from the balcony door was stronger than usual. I sat back down. But as soon as I did, I felt it again, that heavy, slow feeling that something was off. Like the room was too still. Too quiet. Even the refrigerator hum felt distant. Then another sound came, this time from the hallway. A soft footstep. Just one. Not a person walking, just a single step, like someone was standing still and shifted their weight. I waited to hear another, but nothing followed. I walked to the peephole and looked out. The hallway was empty. The motion light above the stairwell flickered once, and then stayed solid. I went back inside, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me. Something about the silence felt unnatural. Usually, even on quiet nights, you'd hear the building settling, or someone closing a cabinet, or a TV through the walls. But that night, everything felt muted, as if the whole building was holding its breath. I kept trying to tell myself it was nothing, just normal apartment noise, late-night paranoia, maybe the wind outside. But the longer I sat there, the harder it became to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in that hallway, or maybe even in that building. Something wasn't right. I just didn't know what yet. The uneasy feeling stayed with me long after the sound stopped. I tried focusing on my laptop again, but every small noise in the apartment felt sharper than it should. I kept glancing at the window, then the door, then back at the wall with the empty unit beside mine. It felt like the entire apartment was tightening around me. At around 11 p.m., another motion alert came through, this time with a clearer thumbnail. There was a shape near the window. Not a person, not fully. Just the edge of something blocking the streetlight outside. It looked like a shoulder, or maybe part of a head. I sat there staring at the image, my heart slowly picking up speed. A second alert came immediately after, but that one was completely black again. I walked to the window and gently pulled one blind down with my finger. The parking lot was empty. Completely empty. Not even a stray cat or someone walking a dog. Still, the camera didn't trigger without something moving. I stepped back from the window. That's when I heard it again, this time from inside the hallway. 2 slow footsteps. Then a pause. Then one more. They were so soft that they barely registered, but they were unmistakably human. I walked to the door, hesitated, and looked through the peephole. At first, I didn't see anything. The hallway was dim, the light above the stairwell buzzing slightly. But as my eyes adjusted, I noticed something. Just a sliver of movement near the far end of the hall. Like someone leaning back out of view the moment I looked. I stepped away from the door, immediately. Every part of me was telling me not to open it, not even a crack. I locked the deadbolt again, just to be sure. I even slid the metal chain across even though I almost never used it. I sat back on the couch and tried to listen. The footsteps didn't return, but now I could swear I heard breathing. Not loud, not close, but steady, coming from the hallway side of the door. I held my breath and leaned slightly toward the doorframe. The breathing stopped the moment I did. My phone buzzed once more. Another camera alert. This time, when I tapped it open, the video played for 3 seconds. A man, tall, wearing a dark hoodie, walking slowly across my balcony. Slowly. Deliberately. Like he wasn't trying to get inside. Like he was circling. I froze, staring at the screen. The balcony was only accessible from inside my apartment or by climbing the railing from the unit below. There was no walkway, no stairs, nothing. Nobody should have been out there. I turned my head toward the sliding door leading to the balcony. The blinds were shut, but I could see the bottom edge moving slightly, as if someone had brushed past them. My chest tightened. My legs felt heavy. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to make a sound. For the first time that night, the reality of the situation hit me. Something wasn't just strange, something was wrong. Very wrong. Someone was out there. And someone was in the hallway. Both close. Both quiet. Both waiting. And I suddenly realized I had nowhere to go. I kept perfectly still, hoping the blinds would stop moving, hoping the camera alert had been a glitch or someone passing by below. But deep down I knew it wasn't. There was no way someone could pass by on a second-floor balcony with no access. Then I heard it. A soft scrape against the glass of the sliding door. Not loud. Not rushed. Just a slow, deliberate drag of something hard sliding across the window. I instinctively crouched behind the arm of the couch, out of view from the balcony. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. I pulled up the camera feed again. The man was still there. This time he was facing the door, standing inches from the glass, his head slightly tilted like he was listening for movement inside. I muted the phone immediately, so the operator's voice wouldn't give away my position. Before I could even dial, another sound came from the hallway. My door handle turning. It wasn't gentle this time. Whoever was out there twisted it hard, like they were trying to break the lock. The metal rattled against the strike plate. My heart felt like it was punching the inside of my chest. I backed deeper behind the couch and tried to stay quiet. The handle jerked violently again. For a moment, both threats, the one on the balcony and the one at the door, felt coordinated. Like whoever was trying to get in wasn't alone. I forced myself to breathe slow and hit 911. I whispered into the phone, telling the operator someone was trying to break into my apartment and that another person was on my second-floor balcony. She told me officers were already in the area. She kept telling me to stay hidden and stay quiet. But hiding didn't feel like enough. The balcony blinds shifted again. A shadow moved behind them. Then a dull thud hit the glass, like a shoulder trying the frame. Not enough to break it, but enough to test it. The person in the hallway stopped with the handle. I could hear them step closer to the peephole. The floorboard creaked under their weight. I imagined them leaning in, listening for where I was. I had to move. The only place with a lock besides the front door was the bathroom. I waited for a slight break in the sounds and then crawled low, staying below window height, staying out of sight from the door. I reached the hallway, slipped into the bathroom, and locked it as quietly as I could. Seconds later, a loud bang hit the front door. I pressed myself against the wall. My breathing was out of control, but I forced myself to stay silent. The banging continued, harder this time. The glass rattled in the living room. Both sides were being hit now. I told the operator I didn't know how long the locks would hold. Then suddenly, everything stopped.
No banging. No scrapping. No footsteps.
Just silence, followed by a single sharp knock on the bathroom door. Not the front door. Not the balcony. The bathroom door. The one I was behind. I held my breath, gripping the edge of the sink, waiting for the lock to snap. Waiting for something to push through. And right when I thought it was over, a police siren echoed outside. The knock stopped instantly. Footsteps ran across the living room. The balcony door shook. The front door rattled. And then, nothing. Whoever was inside was gone. The police arrived within minutes, but by the time they forced their way into the apartment, it was already empty. I stayed in the bathroom until an officer opened the door and told me it was safe to come out. My legs were shaking so badly, I had to use the wall to steady myself. The living room looked exactly the same. No broken glass, no forced entry, no furniture moved. If someone had been inside, they hadn't left a trace. At least, that's what I thought at first. 2 officers split up. One went to check the balcony, the other the hallway. I stood in the living room, staring at the blinds, still expecting a face to appear behind them. The balcony officer called out first. "There are footprints out here," he said. "Fresh ones." I walked closer. The door stayed closed, but I could hear the officer's boots on the concrete outside. "They came from the railing," he added. "Looks like someone climbed up from the unit below." That didn't make sense. The unit below me had been vacant for months, empty, locked, and supposedly secure. The officer radioed for someone to check it. Meanwhile, the officer inside with me examined the front door. He crouched down where the lock had rattled earlier. "That's weird," he said. "No signs of forced entry at all. Not even scratches." "What about the handle turning?" I asked. He looked up at me. "I didn't hear anyone in the hallway when we came up. And the building camera didn't show anyone approaching you." I thought he was mistaken. I heard someone. I heard breathing. I heard the handle. I heard footsteps. It wasn't my imagination. Before I could say anything else, the radio crackled. "Unit 4B is unlocked," the officer downstairs reported. Door was just pulled shut, not latched. The officer near me and I exchanged a look. He motioned for me to stay back, and the 2 of them went downstairs. I followed at a distance. When we reached the doorway of the unit beneath mine, both officers froze. The place was supposed to be empty. Instead, the lights were off, the air was stale, and the carpet was covered in long, uneven tracks, like someone had been dragging their feet across it for days. There were fast food wrappers piled in the kitchen sink, a dirty blanket on the floor, and a stack of empty water bottles in the corner. Someone had been living there for a long time, without anyone knowing. But the worst part was in the far corner of the living room, near the sliding door that faced my balcony's underside. The officer pointed his flashlight at the wall, and my stomach dropped. There were holes, small drilled holes, lined up along the drywall. 7 or 8 of them. Tiny enough to miss unless you were looking closely. Each hole was aimed upward, aimed directly at my floor. My living room, my bathroom, my bedroom. He had been watching, listening, tracking my movements from below. The officer turned to me and said quietly, "Whoever was in here, he didn't climb up tonight for the first time." That's when it hit me. The breathing I heard at my door, the movement in the hallway, the shape at the window, the blinds shifting. It wasn't random. It wasn't sudden. The man hadn't chosen my apartment that night. He had been studying it, studying me, from right beneath my feet, for weeks. The police stayed in the building for hours after the discovery. They searched the vacant unit below mine, checked every door in the hallway, even walked the perimeter outside with flashlights. They didn't find the man. Not a single trace of where he went after they arrived.
No fingerprints.
No footprints leading away. Nothing but the drilled holes, the trash he left behind, and the proof that he had been living almost directly under me for God knows how long. They told me I could stay with a friend or at a hotel until maintenance changed the locks and secured the balcony. I ended up calling my coworker, who lived across town. I slept on her couch that night. Or at least I tried to. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that dark figure on the balcony. I kept hearing the slow twist of my door handle. I kept imagining him standing on the other side of the bathroom door while I was whispering to 911. The worst part was knowing he had been inside the building when the police arrived. I heard him run. I heard the balcony shake. He didn't just disappear into thin air.
He went somewhere.
And nobody saw where. The next morning, I went back with 2 officers to grab some of my things. Walking into the apartment felt wrong. The air felt heavier, the corners darker, even though it was daytime. I kept waiting to hear something from the walls or see someone shift behind the blinds. But nothing happened. The place looked perfectly normal, like the night before had been a bad dream. Still, when I stepped into the bathroom, I froze. The lock, the same one that had held while he stood on the other side, was slightly bent outward. You could only see it if you leaned in close, but it was there. The officer noticed me staring at it. "He tried harder than you think," he said quietly. I moved out of the apartment 2 days later. I didn't even take everything with me. Some things weren't worth going back for. I found a place on the opposite side of town and tried to start
fresh.
For a while, it helped. New walls, new hallways, new neighbors. I thought distance might make me feel normal again. But it didn't, not completely. A few weeks after I settled in, I woke up to a notification on my phone. Motion detected. I sat up fast, already shaking. I opened the alert, praying it was a false alarm. The thumbnail was dark, but not empty. There was something in the corner of the frame. A shape. Small. Hard to make out. But it looked like a shoulder again, just barely visible near the edge of the window. I tried telling myself it was nothing. Maybe a curtain shifting. Maybe headlights. Maybe a bug. But then I heard it. A soft tap. From the wall. Right next to my bed. Not loud. Not frantic. Just the same slow, steady tap I heard weeks before. From the vacant unit beneath me. I haven't reported it yet. I keep telling myself it's just the building settling. Just old pipes. Just my imagination. But sometimes, late at night, when the room goes quiet, I swear I can hear something else through the wall.
Not tapping.
Not scratching. Breathing. And every time I hear it, I wonder the same thing. What if he never left? What if he just found me again?